Now that is what I would call a sincerely romantic effort. Great work, Patrick. I was thinking of like different bits of different bits of Mahler and Richard Strauss, and you know, yeah, just so look. The thing about all that is that you have to really be sure that in your metamorphosis of this piece that you don't lose track of, like, you don't point away with point away from the important parts of the music with some of your added gestures, some of your added phrases, and so on, some of your reinterpretation. Like, for instance, here, like, what is the audience going to be listening to here? They'll be listening to the harp, right? So we really lose this ya da 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 ba 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 bo. Right? We sort of lose this curve in here because the audience isn't listening to it anymore, right? And it just sort of, as it is getting softer here, the harp is still just playing at pianissimo, and it's rising, so it's getting more and more easy to hear. It's little things like that that I feel interrupt the flow of what you're doing. Now, sometimes they complement, like right here. I feel that the strings above complement the journey that you're making here. But then at other times, are you possibly adding an element that ends up sounding repetitive? Like, by turning this into an octave, what you're doing is you're taking this particular range, this register, and then you just end up repeating it. So it sounds repetitive rather than this going from low to, from extremely low to higher, right? So instead we get like the same, like the ear is going to fixate on this. It's not going to fixate on this. So do you really need this little adding an octave on top? Because then this just becomes an echo, and it isn't a new register through which the line rises as it is in the piano part. So I mean, there are a few other bits and pieces, and I'll comment on them as we go. But our main concern, starting at E, and I haven't seen you around making comments or reactions or anything like that in the group, so you may not know that I am doing all of these later evaluations backwards, starting at E, and then going back to D, and then going back to the beginning. All right. So starting at E here. I am really happy at the way that you kept the energy strong in this section, right? And just like bum 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 bum. I don't think you really needed a crescendo here in bass drum and trumpets. I think that it's enough for just everything to be just slamming away at the same dynamic. But it's fine. It didn't hurt anything. I'll talk about how well or how buried some parts might be in a minute, all right? But so a diminuendo here, you're going diminuendo to these tied Bs going forward. Now, is there a possible chance in holding this first flute on top, we're doing the same thing that is the problem here, bassoon to cello in the same range, that, here we have this high B here, and then the violins rise to it, right? So it's like it going up to this B is no surprise because we already have the sound of it before, right? And that is, I mean, it's already problem enough with the way that things are scored that that ultimately the lower part is going to rise to the same B that's being held right here. But the thing is, the decay of the piano means that it will be pretty much gone by the time the pianist's left hand gets to this B, right? So that solves that problem. Okay. All right, so I think that you could have died away even further in your winds and lower strings and brass horns, I should say. So yeah, so this really could have faded down to, I think, piano in the parts that continue on, like the violins here and so on. But the thing about it is, do we even need this triangle hit right here, right? Would it be better just to leave this soundscape completely uninterrupted and the audience is sitting on edge waiting for something to happen, and then contrabassoon, ba, 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 right? And then cellos, da, 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 ba, ba, bum, bum. Yeah, you might not even need this on harp. I mean, it's a kind of a neat little suspense kind of a tool right in there. This is really lovely. Add pedal marks to your celesta parts and vibraphone when you use it. All right, so here you really change around the context of the melody and so on. Like, for instance, I'm almost wondering whether or not you you were reading the treble clef part in the piano part and mistook it for a bass clef part, right? Because here you go D, C, G on the middle line, second space, and lowest line of the part, but actually in treble clef this is of course B A E, right? B A E. So I'm wondering if this was completely misread, right? And that is the context here, because I'm not seeing it in any other part. And like, regardless, let's say that this really was intended to be the melody and you had made that mistake and everything else. Shouldn't the melodic parts carry forward, and shouldn't there be a connected melody here? Da 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 dee, da da da. And this upper part, this stuff up here, has to stay out of the way. And wouldn't the strings have to really become more wedded to what the winds are doing here? And furthermore, you're putting flutes right. You're doubling your flutes with your clarinets in a place where the clarinets will absolutely dominate the flutes, even if both parts are trying to play softer. You could get away with a nice even blend there, except for the fact that you have so much texture sitting around, like especially horns, and then heavy brass down here, right? So it's really not. I mean, like the flutes are doing almost nothing here, right? You better just to leave it in clarinets. Yeah. So I'm beginning to sort of see that this was a transcription error. You missed the treble clef in the at the 6/4 in the piano part. I mean, and so like if you were to restore it, then things would make more sense. So it kind of doesn't make any sense for me to really evaluate and go into it and talk about, oh, you should have done this or that, this or blah blah blah. It really, the relevance really doesn't kick in until right around here. So I'm just going to leave this, and I'll let you think about that, Patrick, about the treble clef that was in the left hand staff at the 6/4 in the piano part, and maybe you can fix this for yourself or something. Okay. So we're getting to this part here, really lovely. Da 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 dum. So the crescendo is for all parts. I think you can leave it out of the horns. But what's really important here is that you think of the implied leap. Da 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 dum ba dum. That's where the dolorosa comes from, and you should put that marking back in. He wants it to be sad. He wants it to be yearning. He wants the players to, turn up the schmaltz a little bit. Okay, he wants it to be a little, he wants it to be endearing. Okay. So watch out for that, and watch out for different dynamic markings on some of these parts. Yeah. Yeah, I think that your dynamic markings here should be more uniform, except for where you leave them out, like here. Yeah. And then the da 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 dum. All right, now here I found some of the scoring in here to be a little. I'm not going to go over it in huge detail, but I felt it sort of decompressed the intimacy of the scoring in the piano part a bit. Um, so it might not be quite as effective as it could have been, but it's still okay. Now, here you have solo cello, and I think that the trumpet should also be marked solo, right? Because it is actually going to be every bit as audible as the cello part. So it really be, like both players will be listening to each other. All right, so you have solo cello, solo trumpet, and it's a real good question about how well can these two parts really combine. Also, with all the sort of strange dynamic mixing that's going on here. So you have a solo that is marked piano, and another one not marked solo, but it's still obviously a solo, marked piano in trumpet. And then you have these parts here in mezzo piano that is like louder. What's more important here? Isn't the solo the most important thing? Shouldn't it possibly be marked mezzo? Like, what if everything in these two bars was marked piano? Okay, except for the timpani. So everything marked piano. The only exception being mezzo piano in your trumpet solo and mezzo forte in your cello and harp part. All right. Is this intended to be arpeggiando here, or not? I mean, it's almost a place where you should mark that this is not arpeggiando, and there should be a nice big slur here. Yeah, I know that cross staff slurs in Sibelius are really annoying. And it's about time that was fixed. Yeah, it was about time that you were able to put a cross staff slur over a part in Sibelius and hit the vertical justify button and not have it suddenly jump up. Right? That is something that just, I mean, come on, it's been how many years has Sibelius been a commercial product, and cross staff stuff has still not been fixed. So let's get it together, okay, developers? All right. I mean, that's something that I was anticipating that Daniel Spreadbury was going to fix back in like the like say about like a decade ago. All right. Yeah. So all those particular issues aside, yeah. So like the problem that you have here, mezzo piano clarinets on this is obscuring the function of your soloists here. So are the bassoons, right? And then da 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 dum. Okay, so here you're having unison English horn and flute, and you have very very sensitive soft accompaniment and celesta right in here. So I mean, and you got a trill on a low D. So I mean that's yeah, about as low as I would ever trill on a flute, with and expect the same kind of fluidity of trilling. I mean, it is problematic because like there's the beautiful intimacy of the flute right in here, just absolutely gorgeous and lovely, and you're pairing it up with an English horn, which is a beautiful sensitive instrument, but I mean, and it will combine with the flute in intriguing ways. But I mean, I just feel like it needs to be softer. I don't see a blend happening here with both of them marked piano. Yeah, I almost feel like this should be like, you know, like poco piano or something like that, or almost like pianissimo or something like that. It's just really, you really need to, like, in order to blend these instruments in this register, the the English horn has to be the humble manservant, and just really like back off and let the flute do most of the work while they just add a little bit of sound. Yeah. Right. And then bassoon da 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 ba bum bum bum. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just really, really not sure about this right in here. The little touches of timpani are really cool though. And the little triangle ding at the end. So very cool ending section. I really like this. You know, I'm probably going to be making a lot of comments that sound very critical, and you know, saying why did you know try this, try that, this might not work, and the way that you plan and so on. But that doesn't mean that I think your orchestration is wrong or bad or anything like that. My main goal in evaluating your work, Patrick, is to look at the approach that you've taken and and evaluate how it could be made better, right? I feel that that's much more constructive than saying this is all wrong, this is the way to do it, right? Because then it turns everybody into the same orchestrator. My style, my goals, everything is to take the ideas that people have, their approach, their philosophy, and like talk to them about what works and what doesn't, and see how like the approach that they took could be improved. I'm just going to say one more thing, and that is about tenuto. All right, so tenuto on a piano part has this kind of like slightly blocky sound, right, or very blocky sound, depending on how it's played and what the dynamic is. On strings, that same exact marking means that the bow is going to travel very quickly across the string at any dynamic, and it's going to have a sort of a wave shape that is like a block. It starts and ends with the same dynamic. It doesn't really have any nuances. It's just zoom, right? It's zoom, 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 note, zoom, 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 note. Do you see? So, like, do you really want that, or do you want perhaps portato? So, if we put a slur over this, it would be right? Or just get rid of get rid of the portato and the slur. Ta 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 ta. Or just slur it. Da 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 da. I think that's better than zoom zoom zoom. Do you know what I mean? It's just like you really kind of it is really out of context. And then the same thing applies to wind instruments. So like when you the regular shape of a wind instrument's note has a little attack, and then it has a little pulse to it, and then it has a little drawback. So you know ta. So if you take if you take that away and you give them a bunch of tenutos, it turns into the syllable doot, right? Doot. And then when you do a row of them, it's like do 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 do. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's it really kind of has a almost like a boring shape to it, I feel. So maybe once again explore portato by slurring it, or just a slur without any articulation marks. Or you could even have mezzo staccato, right? So staccatos with a slur. Da 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 da. So yeah, just really don't really watch out about importing the exact same articulation marks into your score, because the articulation marks, especially with tenuto, mean different things for different instruments. Now, jumping back to D, it looks like you accidentally erased your piccolo entrance here. Yeah, you wouldn't have left this marking here if there hadn't been something over it, right? And it just makes more sense with the way that you've scored everything if the piccolo enters right in here. Okay. So, all right, so you're trying to have everything start off incredibly soft, right? So that you can have this intriguing unison between clarinet and English horn. Just to check something. Yeah. So I mean, is this still A2, A2 on the clarinets? It's a little unclear. I mean, almost could use another marking, right? Even if it seems that it carries on from the previous part. The thing about it is that like you have this beautiful warm texture right in here. These little stabs here, very soft stabs from timpani and lower heavy brass, and they're fun. But I mean, it's a beautiful cascade, and I think that the percussion supports it beautifully and everything else. But it's those damn horns, right? They just really make it difficult to hear this. So, I mean, I don't see any reason why the melody here shouldn't be piano. And if you look at the piano score, there is no implication that the melody is being played at pianissimo, right? You have pianissimo in the on the opposite sides, the cascading octaves, but you do not have pianissimo in the central two staves, right? That those are considered to be, or they're understood to be, the same dynamic in the previous passage, which was piano. So, by by any stretch of the imagination, this should be piano here, not pianissimo. And yeah, then you're pushing into here with your with a bass clarinet. Yeah, something. All horns are in F, right? This isn't a retread of a this isn't a retread of a like an old classical score with natural horns. I think once you've established at the beginning of the piece that your trumpets are in C, then you don't really need this either. And the same thing with the clarinets. If your clarinets are in A for the entire piece, then why do we even need to bother mentioning it here? Bass clarinets are pretty much always in B flat, right? And we can even just tell by looking at the key signatures what key the instruments are in. So I think that these little additional things are just really unnecessary. Clarinets are clarinets. You can tell what the tuning is, and it says at the beginning of the score, unless you change it, right? So I'd say like maybe in a C score, like a not a C score, excuse me, maybe in a score where there are no key signatures, this would be a more important thing to mention what key the clarinet was in. But all things being equal, it's really unnecessary in my thinking. In a concert score where there is a key signature and it's really easy to see what that means, right? Okay, so the horns are veiling the melody here, very very easily, right? And especially with everything else marked pianissimo, it means the horns are on equal footing with everybody else. So if that's so, then their power is, even in a soft dynamic, their power is going to be, considerable. And then here you boost them up to piano like everybody else, and here you boost them up to mezzo forte like everybody else. So your melody has just definitely got to be stronger. Now here you put your melody into the trumpet part, and that's all good. But then you're doubling it with oboe, or is it oboes? How many oboes here? How many flutes here? So you're doubling it with you're doubling trumpet and oboe, and yeah, I mean that. And here you go to A3 A3 trumpets, right? At that point, the oboe is gone; it just doesn't exist anymore. Think about who you're teaming whom up with, and why, and what's the strength and everything else. And also kind of watch out for lines that just disappear, right? So here we've got this line an octave lower, right? And it just goes away. Then there's the further issue of the harmony part, the tracks below, right? And you put that into the horns. So, I mean, I can see that. That works. So, but it's not really working in tandem with. It's not following the horns in a, in a parallel motion with the melody. That's fine. Now, right in here, you drop your piccolo and you drop your strings. Sorry, you drop your violin, and there's no need to do that. Why does that happen? Why is it in your score? Well, because it's in the piano score, right? But it's in the piano score because Barvinsky is starting to throw in this middle voice, ya da da da, ya da da da, right? And so he needs the focus of the eyes of the pianist in the middle of the sound picture, and therefore he's bringing the octave in the right hand closer together to everything else going on. But since nobody hears a pianist, there's no need to drop this. And you're keeping your other parts high, so just keep these parts high, right? No need to drop it. It doesn't really add anything, and all it does is just make the cascading octaves weaker, right? Right when they need to be strong, because you're building up power here in your brass. All right, so here we are pushing towards the big Ravel chords. And perhaps it was an error of transcription, but I do not think you need to change the dynamic. Sorry, excuse me. You do not need to change the harmony here. It is already a beautiful chord. It doesn't need to be shifted or altered in any way. Leave it the way Barvinsky originally scored it, okay? Now here, I really love the motion here in the, so it's like instead of leaping octaves, we've got this, it's almost Wagnerian, but maybe not that Wagnerian, but it has a sort of a quality like that in it, right? I don't know if we need this much weight, all the lower strings and bass clarinet and bassoon and tuba. But, I mean, it does actually make a cool sound. And when you consider how much power you've got in the melody above, maybe it's not such a bad thing. Maybe you don't need bass clarinet in there. What if it were no bassoons but bass clarinet and tuba and lower strings? What kind of a cool color would that be? All right, and here I think that this is a cool way of interpreting the strings, just kind of keeping them up on the top three pitches. Another thing that you could have done here is just scored your strings in octaves, right? And then let the winds and the brass do all the harmony, and then it sounds as if the strings are also playing harmony. That's the oldest trick in the book. You probably know about that one. But it's, it will just focus more string sound on the melody itself, and less of the strings spread out across the harmony where they have less effect and less weight on the music. But, taking the top three pitches is also a sound strategy. All right, so we're pushing forward here. Hey, have you thought of perhaps pushing forward to mezzo forte here in your brass, and then not crescendoing on this bar? Let everybody else crescendo. Stay mezzo forte with your brass in here in all parts, including tuba. Let everybody else be forte. Then crescendo to forte here, and let everybody else be fortissimo. Try that out. Just like make a copy of your score and adjust those dynamics in the copy and see what you think. Because the way that you have it scored now, a lot of what's going on here, blasting away here, especially when you get to A3 in the trumpets here, that will be so powerful as to just blast away all of this stuff you've got here in the middle strings. So, I mean, I would say even dropping the dynamic of the brass in here, these middle string pitches are still wasted because they just don't have the power to make a good case against what's going on in the trombones, right? I mean, the main thing is the trombones, and then of course the horns. Yeah, da 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 da. You know, they really are taking everything away. Now, like right in here, you didn't need to rest here. You could have kept going. The pianist plays an octave, and Barvinsky is making some room for it because he's a pianist. But you don't have to do that. There's nothing about that that means that you have to stop and go rest. Doot doot. You don't. You don't need to. All right. You could build a better mousetrap here, and have an arc going this way, and then have an arc going that way, and then this is really beautiful, right? This is interesting. You rest here, but you don't rest there, and the same thing here. Yeah. So just really watch out. Like, I feel that this is sad because it's beautiful the way you've conceived it, but it doesn't really add a lot to the sound picture. But it will add more if you just bring the brass down a little bit and don't mark them all accented. I remember once I was working with somebody on their score, and they this is long ago before I started doing this online stuff, and they had their brass like just way louder than everybody else, and so I said, look, reduce the dynamic of the brass, and then it'll all balance great. And so he brings back the score, and he did that, but all of the brass were now accented. So it was like, there's no difference. Just don't accent everything. All right. But it would be good to like know what the articulation style is here. If it's just plain notes, that's fine the way it is. But it's maybe staccato or marcato, or I mean, there's something going on here. A poco marcato, which is more like staccato at a loud dynamic. Yeah, but I really love this line right in here. So the melody is beautifully represented. I love the way that you reinterpret the bass line as like with the same durations as the melody, so it just really feels unified. Yeah, it's just such a lovely idea. Yeah, like one of those things where you see something, you say like, "Darn it, I wish I'd thought of that." It would have kept like more motion in my bass part. Yeah, and then here, I love the leap up, but I almost feel like you're giving it away. Like here you have, yeah. So what happens here in the piano part? Isn't this F double sharp, right? And D sharp, E sharp, right? So you've really reinterpreted the melody right there. I'm not sure that works. The way that you've rewritten, and I'm wondering if that's just possibly an error. Anyway, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, aside from little shifts and stuff like that, I think the melody is pretty well served here, and I just wonder if you're just giving things away too soon. Like we would get way more impact right in here. But I mean, I don't see a big benefit here, a big plus in like dropping out on some of our stuff. I mean, and a lot of things that you added in here, make a lot of sense. Like right in here, this lovely little injection here. and then the trumpets coming in on the melody, but then continuing them on without giving them enough power, right? They just, this stuff right in here just does not have enough power to really exist on its own without the input of a stronger instrument. And like, I just feel at this point there's just too much going on with the way that you've got it scored, especially with more motion in the bass. I think that this, like, you can't really hear it in the mock-up, and I don't think you would really hear it all that well in real life. And especially not with the brass at the same fortissimo as the rest of the orchestra. Oops. But yeah, I mean, I just think that there needs to be a little bit more consistency in the scoring of the melody in the first page rather than some of these dropouts and some of these other things. Yeah, but cool. I love these surges here in the in your percussion. It's really nice, and yeah. So just kind of looking at this page, I don't think like there's anything more I could really add to this because you have chosen to to work out most of the functions of what is going to happen, and then like add a few little asides here and there. And while I really applaud the innovation, I don't think that there's enough power yet with the way that it's scored. So maybe if there was some way to progress the texture, right, so that things kept mounting in force and intensity and insanity, this could really just be incredibly impactful, even more romantic and over the top and insane and intense. If there were some way for the functions to swap from time to time, or contrast each other, or trade off, or dovetail into each other, going into different parts and so on. If there were some way to like maybe gradually, to start strong with a melody and gradually increase it in scope and height until finally it was just really screaming away toward the end. If there's some way to keep the functions from spilling over into some of the functions from spilling over into areas where they weaken other parts, right? Like for instance here, da 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 da. Like you only have your trombones playing this all important little bit right in here. And there's like no crescendo or anything. There's like no significance here, other than just the articulation, and you don't have the rhythmic support here from the timpani. It's just going bonk bonk bonk. And also like if you're gonna have the bass play along at the rhythm of the melody, then shouldn't this be bum 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 bum? I think you could have really emphasized this a lot more. Yeah. Could if the strings end up here, could they not have pushed into this? Could we have brought down the some of these instruments on top so that the register that things are focused in is more central, less just as it is central to the piano? Yeah, I mean, I still think there's more work that you could do on this D section, but that is not to say that you didn't do a great job. You did a great job. Now, finally, back to the beginning, where I feel you scored this actually really nicely. It's interesting how you have like the parallel octave here in the harmony part. But you don't double the octave in the flutes until here. Obviously, here I have a note. Thomas corrected rehearsal letters. All right, so we got to talk about this, Patrick, especially because I think A, we've known each other for so long, and B, you've been a part of these orchestration challenges on and off, and C, you were a supporter on Patreon and everything else. If I could ask you to not add in extra rehearsal letters, that would be really awesome, because I just really need them to stay the way they are in each of these entries. And I think I'll have like a checklist next year. It'll say, check for rehearsal letters, same as in, example, and so on. So yeah, we can get rid of this. But I just thought I would bring that up. So yeah, so everybody, please, and I know that like a lot of things, like where I put the rehearsal letters, it really makes more sense to have A starting at the 12/8, doesn't it? And where I put the B rehearsal letter doesn't even need to be there at all. All right. So, but it just has to do with the way that I can hold these orchestration challenges and offer them to different people at different levels of commitment, and also just like how I can divide up the different parts into how I evaluate them. Okay, so I hope that is all fine with everybody. So yeah, so I liked some of the harmonization in here, but like, okay, so here we're getting like borderline. Arg, chair doesn't want to move. Here we're getting borderline into like parts, subsidiary parts that you've added on, which are beautiful. Do they distract from the musical motion? Almost in here, but it's still fine. And like even these little touches here, they don't really interfere with the flow, right? So just keeping the flow of Barvinsky's original ideas, I think his harmony, especially in parts where the harmony is part of the effect, right? Like here, I've taken a lot of orchestrators to task. Not really to task. I mean, not like that, but just talk to orchestrators a lot about changing the harmony of some of this stuff. That's really important for it to have a kind of a floaty impressionist feeling. But the interesting thing is that you are not orchestrating in the impressionist style here at all. You are really focusing like a really nice late 19th century kind of an approach in a lot of ways. This right here can just be a regular dotted, right? That can just be dotted, a dotted whole note, right? Let me get the keypad up here. Right, so that's really what this needs to be. In the in the original piano score, Barvinsky had these tied dotted half notes because he wanted you to keep track of holding on. He just really wanted to make sure you absolutely held on to the upper note there, and that you knew where its relationship was in the rhythm of the half bar. Okay, so that's the reason for this being tied like this, but there's no need for you to import that into your score, right? It should be like this. The flute part should be like this. Now, the difference is if you intended the upper voice, like if you intended for both of these voices to increase to mezzo forte, in that case, it's perfectly fine to have it the way it is. So that might have actually been your intention. So in which case, I apologize for the sidetrack. Now here, you have this big push to E minor, and just a few thoughts about this with the horns in here and the winds being so powerful here. There's pretty much no way that this is going to be heard very well on harp. I mean, you even have a timpani roll, right? So if you took this an octave higher, maybe it would be heard. And then the same thing applies here. The power of your scoring here is, especially adding even more of horns in, right? Like right after this, you're expecting the harp to have this beautiful little solo. Well, you can't hear it in the mock-up, and you won't hear it in real life, right? You just hear this. By the time we get to the end of this bar, especially with the diminuendo, right? We'll just hear a few little tinkles from the harp. We won't really hear the beauty of what you're scoring here. Take it up an octave, adjust the dynamics, have the crescendo happen faster, maybe don't get so big, and mark up your harp part to forte, and you've got a chance, right? Or maybe you don't want that. Maybe we would be better to have like something in there like celesta or some other kind of element, glockenspiel. All right, now moving on. So we're starting to see little elements of waltz start to creep in here, and that has to do with like a little bit of perception of the left hand pattern not being a unified flow, but it is a unified flow because the left hand is reaching over during this rest and it's playing a middle voice part and then it's coming back and playing these two notes, and then during this rest is playing another middle voice part. This is why I urged everybody to really, really listen to Vilina Petrochenko's performance, where the left hand flows beautifully. There is no disconnection here that would lead to possibly building on it with, kind of pa kind of a rhythm. But you built that out of it, and it's a valid feature of your music, and you really get into it at the C section. So yeah, I'm not going to critique it too much, but just be aware that the really look at the flow of the music across. Like just go back and look at the evaluation criteria for the A section that I have in this video, and you'll see right away like the way that I've marked out the relationships in the middle voice in like a red color, imbuing middle voices, imbuing meaning, right? That's like the relationship there needs to stay, in my opinion, needs to flow. All right. So I would say that it is actually somewhat amazing how much strength you get out of your melody part right in here. Even though you have got all of this middle voice stuff going on, but like here is where I would say your little added flurries, your little added frills start to interfere with the flow of the melody. Da 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 da, bum 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 bum. Right, so we've got this part right in here does not match up with the pitches in the melody. So, and when you add the harp to that, then the melody is just becoming secondary to your added stuff right in here. Right? I mean, and it's beautiful. The things that you've added are beautiful, but I think that they, right when people should really be focusing on da da dum, you've got some stuff happening over it, right? I mean, it's not so bad here. I think actually this is pretty good. It's just that this I worry about, this kind of scoring right in here. And then here you get really big, really fast. And it's just a question of proportions. Do you want to be, do you want to be using up that much force that soon in this beautiful, delicate little piano prelude? Is one of the things where I'm really reminded of 19th century scoring, because getting big fast is something people just do. Do you know what I mean? It's like just get to the meat and potatoes, right? And you don't worry too much about the gravy and the chocolate fish. But yeah, this reharmonization right in here, and then the cool way that you get back to E minor. That's really, really fun. So I wouldn't have traded it for the world. It's really great the way you put that in there. And this is really lovely. All these flurries over the top. Just so long as some of it supports your melody right in there. It's all good. All right, so now we're getting to the B section. Yeah. I wonder if the timpani isn't just a bit much here. Like you're sort of keeping the mass going here. By the way, just this thing right in here, 1 and 2 on an interval. We don't need to know that this is 1 and 2. We know that this is 1 and 2. You only have 2 flutes in this piece, right? So here's both of them. We don't need to know what their numbers are. We know. You don't need to do this in entrances. You only need to tell us if there is a single person playing, like right here. Like which one is this guy? So, but we don't need that here when 2 people are playing. I'm seeing that in a few scores recently, so it's almost like the problem with people marking A1 in their parts that cropped up last year. Yeah, you don't need to do this. We know, right? It's as plain as what we see right on the page. But it is nice to know who's playing what. How many bassoons on this single line? How many clarinets on this single line? And if you've told us previously, right here, A2, right, A2, then it's fine. We know. It does. Yeah, I'm looking for it in the bassoon part. There it is. All right. Okay. All right. Now, with the horns kind of reaching up into here and, adding their, basically, becoming part of the melodic curve here, I would really, mark this as first and third, and this as second and fourth. Okay? It's really, this is where the teamwork of the first and the third come in, and they should just lock together. And if that means that you're going to have 2 voices on each staff, and then the upper line here is going to be playing under the first, and then the same thing for the third and the fourth respectively in their staff, then that's just what you got to do. All right. I mean, you're doing something like that here, so you should do it here. First and second, yeah, they should definitely have a harmonic relationship that works together on intervals. But I would say if you're going for it right here, you got forte and everything is pitched high and it's a melodic part. That's pretty much indicated to be first and third. Is how I would score it. Yeah, but just really extremely powerful, richly colored scoring right in here. And once again, I just feel the melody itself is just a little weak. Yeah. Yeah, and here you have this in tremolo, which doesn't necessarily make it any stronger in the first violin. Okay. So, just the big question here, B going forward, is how well have you set up the flow of the wandering melody, right? And here you have got a version of it in, you've got a sort of a precursor looking forward in clarinet and trumpet. And I mean, do you really want these all to be separate pitches? Or do you want it to be slur, but you forgot to put a slur on? And then the same thing in here. You have like a variation of the bass line right in here, which I think is really lovely. Yeah. Yeah, and just like further on in the piece, I worry about the efficacy of this scoring right in here. You know what I mean? But at least the trumpet part isn't like just repeating this over and over again. Yeah. Yeah, so with 3 trumpets. Yeah, this is going to be very forceful right in here. You almost don't even need your clarinet right in here. Okay, so you have set it up to a degree, but it's not like a preview based on previous voices, which I think is actually pretty good. With mallets, with what mallets? Hard, soft, rubber, yarn, what? Like, it's not enough to say just mallets, right? With mallets, what kind of mallets? So if it's soft mallets, especially yarn mallets, then you'll get this beautiful whoosh that seems to come out of nowhere. If it's hard mallets, then you get, or like you could actually have like rubber mallets, like medium rubber. That's one of my favorite things, because you get the kind of you get like a bit of the, you kind of hear a bit of the the mallet hitting the cymbal surface in a way that you don't get with sticks, right? With sticks, since the sticks have such a tiny little surface that is hitting, is making contact with the surface of the cymbal, and it's plastic, usually, or nylon. It you get this little ticking sound, but with a medium rubber mallet, you get you really feel a lot more motion in it. So which mallets? Got to tell us. Okay, yeah, this is really lovely the way that you've set up this harmony, and then what happens is your cellos trade off to violas, trade off to seconds. And it's interesting. You're giving the seconds the higher part before the firsts come in. But since your firsts are headed for this right in here, that does make sense. And I love I love that this little detail here in the celesta works absolutely beautifully with the harp. Okay, and then this roll in here, and you echo in the winds. So you are contrasting your functions right in here. The only fly in the ointment for me is that the harp tends to sort of unify things a little bit much. What if there was another instrument you could bring in here? Or what if you just let the winds do their thing and didn't have the harp accompany it, right? Here you have strings and harp answered by winds, right? With maybe, at this point, the harp coming back in along with the celesta. Just letting it breathe a little bit. Then here you throw in this solo right in here. And yeah, I'm wondering how much difference that makes in the scope of all the other stuff that's going on. Okay. And then, right in here, da 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 da. Okay, so what's wrong with the way that Barvinsky scored it, right? He has this beautiful line. It's supported by some harmony from below. It could be a little bit more motion, all right? Isn't there some motion in the left-hand part? Some do 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 da da da. Okay, but all that aside, why add any harmony underneath it? What is Barvinsky doing there with his melodies? Like here, he's going wandering, and he's going wandering against the backdrop of expectancy, right? Expectancy, mystery with expectancy, right? And then he sets it up at just like a really warm determination. I am going wandering, and then he does it, and then it ends up in the next key, right? But here you're kind of telling us you're setting parameters for his wandering, right? You're saying, okay, well, this is the harmonic context that he's doing. Well, we didn't need that. We just needed to hear him go wandering, right? So I think you're adding too much information here, with all respect. And once again, you have got a combination between English horn and flute. And while I think that's really beautiful, I think that to get a really beautiful blend here, that the English horn has got to submerge itself behind the flute for it to work. But I mean, considering how both of these are combined with the violins, it's sort of immaterial because the violins will soak up everything that's going on in the flute. All right. So, what if you just didn't have any of this stuff, except for maybe a little touch of harp here at the end, maybe just like on the last beat of the baton, and you just had flute and English horn working together? I think it would be just much more breathtaking, and just get rid of the muted trumpets. They're not necessary. All the information that you need in this bar is in this line. I mean, don't even think you need the harp, because it takes us beautifully. Just imagine, just a big breathy gap right in here. No strings, no brass, just these two lines working together. Not even any harp, and then they end up here in this beautiful place. I think that would be just so effective, and I would finish it with the English horn and the flute dovetailing into the oboe and violin parts. All right, now here you set up like a little bit of a waltz. And I think it's really, really cool. And I completely relate to it, as a real sort of Central European kind of a thing that resonates with my background, at least on one side of the family. Yeah, that's nice. That's just very pleasant. Okay, now, just like before I start to pick apart the orchestration, I just want to point one thing out: is that here you go to a 5 of 5, and then you do the same thing in the D section. So I don't think you can do this twice, right? I think you should save it for the place where it is going to be the most effective and the most unexpected. And I feel that that is the second time, not the first time. So, like, you change the context, like, way back in, just before the B section, right? And that was a beautiful reharmonization. So what if you just left the harmonization or the harmony here the way that it is in the score, right? Take out the F sharps and the horns and so on. And then let the 5 of 5 happen in the next part, right? That way, like, you have your grand reharmonization before, you have Barvinsky's harmony the second time, and then you have the 5 of 5 in the in the next part, right? So we get that major third of the D, which when you put it over the G, the pedal G, creates a beautiful major ninth chord, right? So I think wherever it's going to be the most harmonically effective, I believe that that's the second time that you do it. But here I just feel it's just a little bit of overkill. It's like when you do it twice in a row, the second time it's like, oh yeah, he's doing that again. That's cool. But it's not like wow, did you hear how he changed that? And then you do it again. It's like, oh yeah, okay, he's doing it again. All right. So just try to keep your innovations innovative. All right. Don't, like, if you find a trick to do, just try not to do it twice in a row. Okay. Because it's like the audience pays attention to that instead of the music. All right. Okay. So just looking at the overall structure here, I love the leaping octaves. I think that they're beautifully scored. Tuba, like, you're really trading off tuba, bassoon, bass clarinet, cellos, and so on, and it becomes more regular, as we've got our papa going on here. And then, you've got tremolo harmony in the middle. So, are you possibly overusing that technique, Patrick? Like the tremolo harmony? So you just kind of always question, like, when you are doing the same thing again and again and again, whether or not it's really needed. I mean, considering how, everything is sort of happily, merrily playing along over the same exact register as the tremolos here. And that happens in other areas, doesn't it? Maybe you don't need to tremolo. Maybe it could just be, arco and a separate bow on each bar. Yeah. And here I felt that this did not interfere. Like, some of the flurries did not interfere. Some of the new information did not interfere with the melody. Okay. And some of it did a little bit, but it's not so bad. I just kind of wish that it weren't so big, right? Like, here you're saying melody is piano to mezzo forte, right? And then fade. But here you're saying, hey, I want this to be mezzo forte, clarinets, a due plus piccolo, which is like, when you think about it, yeah, it's like 2 octaves apart. So you're also, like, with the clarinets, you're setting up like this very spicy kind of an overtone. Yeah, so maybe this does not need to be so loud and distracting of the melodic curve. Yeah, and this is really cool right in here, the way you bring in the trumpets. So yeah, just really watch out about introducing new elements so that they don't like they don't pull our focus away from the parts of the structure, the existing structure, that need to be respected, right? But I mean, look, all that aside, like here, like I as I mentioned before, I really love what you're doing with this score, and sitting around and critiquing it and giving you feedback and so on. Well, I mean, you're a genius, right? You don't need me to tell you that. What you need me to tell you is how you could make your approaches even stronger than they are. So those are my thoughts on it, and they're not the final word by any means. Even for me, there's more that I could probably find out with this if I had more time to study it. But having said all that, I just really want to say one thing, and that is that I so much appreciate your support. And you've been a longtime supporter, and you've really helped me keep things running here. And you've shared some of your own musical projects in the past, and they are fantastic, and so just so smart, if you know what I mean. Like, it's just, and fascinating, and I really respect that, and I'm so glad that that voice, that outlook, that perspective is part of the support on Patreon. It just really makes a huge difference, and and for it to all coalesce this year with your entry to the orchestration challenge, and your perspective on that, and which I think is really wonderful. And there's even though there's a lot of romance in here, there's also a lot of folksiness. Like think of the papa right in here. It just really reminds me of the time that I've spent in Germany, and just really enjoying myself, especially, at that time it was West Germany and East Germany, and I was not allowed to go to East Germany, to where some of my family was. But yeah, the time that I spent mainly in Cologne, a little bit in Munich and Frankfurt. Yeah, there's just a lovely sense to this, of a lot of different influences and a lot of different things put in the score, and a wonderful, very powerful romantic vision in your orchestration. And that was really great to bring into this too, and in a way that just seemed very, very knowledgeable and instinctive. That made a huge difference as well. So, but bringing that into the mix and having it be part of our support for Ukrainian musicians, that also meant a lot too. So thanks to you, thanks to all of my Patreon supporters, thanks to my website subscribers and regular viewers who spread the word about the Lisa Batiashvili special appeal for those musicians. And yeah, I mean, if that was the only reason why I did this year, then I think it would be justified enough. So thanks everybody for that, and there will be yet another, actually two more awesome entries coming your way today. So watch for those.